London, 1816. Lady Winifred Vance stood at the edge of the Pembroke ballroom, expertly wielding her fan to cool her flushed cheeks. At 28, she had become accustomed to her role as an observer rather than a participant in the marriage mart. 7 seasons had come and gone, leaving her firmly on the shelf by society's reckoning. Tonight, like most nights, she watched her 18-year-old cousin, Miss Lucy Foster, navigate her first season with all the breathless anticipation Winifred herself had once possessed. "Lady Winifred, might I procure you a glass of lemonade?" asked Mr. Barton, a kindly widower of 50 whose attention toward her had been reliably pleasant, if uninspiring. "You are all consideration, sir," she replied with a genuine smile. Mr. Barton was among the few gentlemen who still treated her as though she possessed some value beyond that of a chaperone or companion. Their conversation was easy, consisting mainly of observations about the weather and gentle gossip about mutual acquaintances. "I understand Lord and Lady Pembroke have secured quite a coup in attendance tonight," Mr. Barton remarked. "The Marquis of Oxbridge has deigned to grace us with his presence. Quite unusual, as I understand he rarely attends such gatherings." Winifred's interest was piqued despite herself. "Indeed? I confess I know little of the gentleman beyond his reputation for being exceedingly wealthy and equally reclusive. He has been abroad these past 10 years, diplomatic service in Vienna, I believe. Recently inherited the title upon his father's passing and has returned to take up his responsibilities." Mr. Barton nodded toward the entrance. "And unless I am mistaken, that would be him arriving now." Winifred turned discreetly. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as a tall figure entered the ballroom. The Marquis of Oxbridge cut an imposing figure, his broad shoulders emphasized by impeccable tailoring, his cravat arranged in a style that was elegant without being ostentatious. His features were striking rather than conventionally handsome, a strong jaw, patrician nose, and eyes that seemed to assess everything with cool intelligence. "He appears rather formidable," she observed. "Indeed. The Tun has already begun matchmaking efforts, naturally. A marquis of his wealth and lineage will have mothers throwing their daughters at him before the night is through." "Poor man," Winifred said with genuine sympathy. "To be hunted so mercilessly upon one's return to society." Mr. Barton chuckled. "I suspect Lord Oxbridge is more than capable of fending for himself." Across the room, Lady Pembroke was already leading the Marquis toward her cluster of eligible young ladies, which included Winifred's cousin Lucy. Winifred watched with amusement as the young women all adopted expressions of practiced demureness. "How predictable we all are," she mused. "Like a theatrical production where everyone knows their part." "Except you, Lady Winifred," replied Mr. Barton with unexpected perception. "You have never played your expected role, have you?" Before she could respond, a commotion near the refreshment table drew their attention. Lucy stood there, her pale yellow gown now sporting a large crimson stain, her face a mask of mortification. Winifred immediately moved to her cousin's aid, extracting her from the knot of tittering débutantes. "Come, Lucy. Let us see what can be done," she said soothingly, leading the girl toward a side chamber where ladies might refresh themselves. "It's ruined," Lucy wailed once they were away from prying eyes. "Lady Harcourt's daughter deliberately bumped into me. She's had her eye on Lord Fennington all evening and saw him speaking with me." "Hush now." Winifred examined the stain. "This can be salvaged. Salt and cold water will lift much of it, and we can pin your shawl to disguise what remains." As she worked efficiently to restore Lucy's appearance, the door opened, admitting Lady Pembroke's eldest daughter, Harriet. "Lucy, are you quite recovered? Mamma sent me to check on you. The Marquis of Oxbridge has specifically requested an introduction, and she's beside herself with excitement." Lucy's tears dried instantly. "The Marquis? Truly?" "Yes, though I cannot imagine why. His refused introductions to the Langley twins and even Lady Elizabeth Moulton." Harriet's tone suggested this was incomprehensible. "Mamma will never forgive you if you keep him waiting." "I'll be but a moment." Lucy turned to Winifred with pleading eyes. "Is it possible, cousin?" Winifred adjusted the shawl and nodded. "You look lovely, dear." Go and meet your Marquis." After the girls departed, Winifred took a moment to compose herself before returning to the ballroom. She felt a familiar pang, not quite envy, but something adjacent to it. Not for the attention of the Marquis specifically, but for the excitement of possibility that seemed reserved for women a decade her junior. When she re-entered the ballroom, her eyes were immediately drawn to the tall figure of Lord Oxbridge, now standing with Lucy and Lady Pembroke. To her surprise, however, the Marquis appeared distracted, his gaze scanning the room until, most unexpectedly, it landed on Winifred herself. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Winifred felt an inexplicable jolt of awareness before propriety demanded she look away. "Lady Winifred," Mr. Barton had returned to her side, "I fear I must take my leave shortly. Might I claim a dance before I go?" She accepted gratefully, glad for the distraction from the unsettling moment that had just transpired. As Mr. Barton led her into a country dance, she forced herself to focus on the steps and her partner's pleasant conversation rather than wondering why the Marquis of Oxbridge had looked at her with such intent interest. Later, as she stood once more at the periphery of the gathering, a deep voice beside her said, "You dance quite elegantly, Lady Winifred." She turned, startled to find the Marquis of Oxbridge himself standing at her elbow. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a striking shade of grey, like the sea before a storm. "Your lordship," she acknowledged with a curtsy. "I confess I'm surprised you noticed." Most eyes were drawn to the more youthful performers. "I find youthful enthusiasm is often overvalued when compared to graceful confidence," he replied. "I am Lord Hugh Oxbridge, though I suspect you already know this, as my arrival seems to have generated an unfortunate amount of gossip. Lady Winifred Vance. And yes, your appearance has caused quite a stir. You have become the season's most coveted matrimonial prize in the space of an hour." His mouth twitched. "How terrifying." The candid response surprised a laugh from her. "Indeed. You have my sympathies, Lord Oxbridge." "Hugh, please, when we are not in formal company." He gestured to the relatively quiet corner where they stood. "I believe this qualifies as a moment of respite from formality." "That would be most improper," she said, though her tone was light. "Ah, yes. Propriety. I've spent so long in diplomatic circles abroad that I fear I've forgotten some of our more rigid social conventions." He studied her with those penetrating grey eyes. "I understand you are related to Miss Foster." "My cousin. I serve as her companion for the season." "How fortunate for her to have such guidance." He paused. "Would you do me the honor of a dance, Lady Winifred?" She blinked in surprise. "You wish to dance with me?" "There are at least a dozen young ladies who would be far more suitable partners." "Suitable for what purpose, exactly?" he asked, his expression amused. For the usual purpose," she stammered, uncharacteristically flustered. "A gentleman in your position typically seeks the company of young ladies of marriageable age." "And you are not of marriageable age." She felt her cheeks warm. "I am 28, Lord Oxbridge." "As I am 36, I can only view that as refreshingly youthful," he replied. "The dance, Lady Winifred." Still bewildered by this turn of events, she placed her hand on his proffered arm. "If you insist, my lord." As they took their places for the quadrille, Winifred became acutely aware of the surprised glances and whispers directed their way. Lord Oxbridge, however, seemed entirely untroubled. "You have caused quite a sensation," she murmured as they moved through the first figures of the dance. "The ton will be speculating wildly about your intentions." "Let them," he replied simply. "I've long since ceased to concern myself with the opinions of society gossips." "A luxury few can afford," she observed. His expression grew more serious. "Yes, I recognize that. Particularly for women, society's judgment can be crushing." The dance separated them briefly before bringing them back together. "You speak from observation or experience, my lord?" she asked. "Both. My sister was subjected to cruel speculation when she chose to marry a man deemed unsuitable by the ton." "And was she happy in her choice?" "Extraordinarily so, until his untimely death 3 years ago." A shadow crossed his face. She found something authentic in a world of artifice. I've always admired her courage. The music drew to a close, and Lord Oxbridge escorted her back to the edge of the ballroom. To Winifred's surprise, he remained at her side. You need not feel obligated to continue this conversation, my lord, she said softly. You have fulfilled whatever social duty prompted you to dance with me. He regarded her with genuine puzzlement. Is it so difficult to believe I might simply enjoy your company, Lady Winifred? Before she could formulate a response, Lady Pembroke descended upon them, Lucy in tow. Lord Oxbridge. I see you've met Lady Winifred. How lovely. Lucy has been hoping for another opportunity to speak with you. Her meaning could not have been clearer as she all but pushed her young charge forward. Miss Foster, Lord Oxbridge acknowledged with a bow. I hope you've recovered from your earlier mishap. Lucy blushed prettily. Thanks to my cousin's quick thinking, my lord. Lady Winifred seems possessed of many admirable qualities, he replied, his gaze returning to Winifred with unmistakable interest. Lady Pembroke's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Lady Winifred has been a godsend as a chaperone for the younger ladies this season. Such a comfort to have someone of her experience to guide them. The slight emphasis on experience was not lost on Winifred, who recognized it for what it was, a polite reference to her age and unmarried status. Experience is vastly underappreciated, Lord Oxbridge replied smoothly. Lady Winifred was just promising to point out some of the more interesting personalities in attendance tonight. If you'll excuse us. Without waiting for a response, he offered Winifred his arm once more and led her away, leaving Lady Pembroke openly gaping. That was rather neatly done, Winifred remarked once they were out of earshot, though I made no such promise. Didn't you? How careless of me to misremember. His eyes danced with mischief. Consider it a rescue, then. You looked as though you might prefer extraction from that particular conversation. I've grown accustomed to such interactions. That doesn't mean you enjoy them. He guided her toward the terrace doors. Shall we take some air? I find these affairs stifling after too long indoors. The impropriety of such a suggestion from a man she'd just met should have shocked her, but Winifred found herself nodding. For a few minutes, perhaps. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing after the heat of the ballroom. A few other couples strolled the lamplit garden paths, always in sight of the doors and windows as propriety demanded. You must know you've set tongues wagging, Winifred said as they walked. Paying such marked attention to an aging spinster when every eligible young lady awaits your notice. He stopped walking and turned to face her directly. Is that truly how you see yourself, Lady Winifred? As an aging spinster? She met his gaze steadily. It is how society sees me, Lord Oxbridge. I harbour no illusions about my position. And yet you don't seem bitter. What would be the point? I've made my peace with my circumstances. Not every woman is destined for marriage, and there are compensations to independence. Such as? She considered the question. Freedom to think one's own thoughts. To read what one chooses without a husband's censure. To avoid the perils of childbirth that have claimed so many of my friends. A practical assessment, he acknowledged. Though I sense there's more you're not saying. Winifred hesitated, then admitted, I did wish for marriage once. For companionship, for children. But I would not marry without affection, and the gentleman who offered did not inspire such feelings. A woman of principle, then. Or of foolish romanticism, depending on one's perspective. Lord Oxbridge smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his austere features. I find I much prefer the former interpretation. A clock somewhere struck 11, and Winifred reluctantly said, we should return. Lucy will be wondering where I've gone. As they walked back toward the ballroom, Lord Oxbridge said, I am hosting a small gathering at Oxbridge House next week. Nothing elaborate, some music, conversation, perhaps cards. Would you and your cousin do me the honor of attending? Winifred was saved from immediate response by their entry into the ballroom, where Lucy immediately rushed to her side. There you are. I've been searching everywhere. Lord Fennington has asked for the supper dance, and I need your advice on whether to accept. Lord Oxbridge bowed. I shall leave you to your familial consultation, ladies. Lady Winifred, I hope to receive a favourable response to my invitation. With that, he disappeared into the crowd. What invitation? Lucy demanded, her eyes wide. Winnie, did the Marquis of Oxbridge invite you somewhere? Us, Winifred corrected. He invited us to a gathering at his home next week. Lucy squealed in delight. How extraordinary! Every lady here has been trying to secure his attention, and he's invited you, us. We must accept, of course. I'm not certain it would be wise, Winifred began, but Lucy was already rushing off to share the news with her friends, leaving Winifred to wonder what the Marquis's true intentions could possibly be. The following week brought an elegant invitation card to their townhouse, confirming Lord Oxbridge's verbal invitation. Lucy was ecstatic, convinced the Marquis had used Winifred merely as a conduit to extend the invitation to her. Winifred allowed her cousin this belief, finding it far more plausible than the alternative, that Lord Oxbridge had any genuine interest in her company. On the evening of the gathering, Winifred dressed with more care than usual, selecting a gown of deep burgundy silk that she knew flattered her complexion. It was fashionable enough without attempting the youthful styles that would look ridiculous on a woman her age. You look lovely, Winnie, Lucy said generously as they prepared to depart. That colour suits you wonderfully. Thank you, dear. Winifred adjusted her cousin's shawl. And you look positively radiant. Lord Oxbridge will be quite dazzled. Lucy giggled. Do you truly think so? Mamma says his fortune is twice what was initially rumoured. I hope you would consider more than his fortune if it came to that, Winifred gently admonished. Of course, but it doesn't hurt that he's handsome as well as rich, Lucy replied pragmatically. Though rather old. Winifred bit back a smile at the thought of the 36-year-old Marquis being described as old by an 18-year-old. Indeed. Practically ancient. Oxbridge House was a magnificent Portland Place mansion, its facade illuminated by torches that cast a warm glow over arriving guests. Inside, the decor was elegant but understated, evidence of wealth without ostentation. Lord Oxbridge himself greeted them in the entrance hall. Lady Winifred, Miss Foster. I'm delighted you could attend. His eyes lingered on Winifred. That shade is most becoming, my lady. Winifred felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. Thank you, Lord Oxbridge. Your home is magnificent. A mausoleum when empty, he replied quietly. It improves significantly with good company. He escorted them personally to the music room, where perhaps 30 guests were already assembled. Winifred recognized several familiar faces, including Mr. Barton, who nodded pleasantly in her direction. I've engaged a string quartet, Lord Oxbridge explained, and there are card tables in the adjacent room for those who prefer such entertainment. Please make yourselves comfortable. Throughout the evening, Winifred observed with growing bewilderment as Lord Oxbridge repeatedly sought her company. He introduced her to his friends, solicited her opinion on the musical selections, and even partnered her for a set of country dances when some of the younger guests requested musical accompaniment for dancing. During a moment when Lucy was happily engaged in conversation with Lord Fennington, Winifred found herself once again in Lord Oxbridge's company near the refreshment table. You seem perplexed, Lady Winifred, he observed. She decided on directness. I confess I am, my lord. Your attentions this evening have been most unexpected. Have they? I thought I made my interest clear at the Pembroke ball. Interest, she repeated. Lord Oxbridge, while I am flattered, I must question your purpose. If you seek a liaison of an improper nature, I beg your pardon. He looked genuinely shocked. Is that what you believe of me? I can conceive of no other reason why a man in your position would pay such marked attention to a woman in mine, she replied frankly. I am not young or wealthy or connected enough to be considered an eligible match for a marquis. His expression hardened slightly. You think very little of me if you believe I would dishonor you so. I think very little of society's expectations, she corrected. And of how they constrain us all. Perhaps I care less for society's expectations than you imagine. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Lady Winifred, I admire your directness, so allow me to respond in kind. I find you intelligent, principled, and refreshingly genuine in a world of artifice. Your age is immaterial to me, indeed, I consider it an advantage, as you've developed the wisdom and character that only experience can bring. Winifred stared at him, momentarily speechless. I have no dishonorable intentions, he continued. Quite the opposite. I would like permission to call on you properly. To court me, she asked incredulously. Yes. His gaze was steady. If you would permit it. Winifred glanced across the room, where Lucy was laughing at something Lord Fennington had said. My cousin appears to be developing an attachment to Lord Fennington, if I'm not mistaken, Hugh finished for her. A most advantageous match, should it proceed. The Tun will talk, she warned. The Tun always talks. He smiled slightly. I spent a decade in diplomatic service, Lady Winifred. I've negotiated treaties between nations at war. I believe I can weather a bit of drawing-room gossip. Despite herself, Winifred laughed. You make it sound so simple. Not simple, but worthwhile. He held her gaze. May I call on you tomorrow? She took a deep breath. Yes, Lord Oxbridge. You may. True to his word, Lord Oxbridge, Hugh, as he insisted she call him in private, called at precisely the acceptable hour of 3 the following afternoon. This began a courtship that set the Tun abuzz with speculation. Lady Jersey declared it a scandal, Lady Cowper thought it a charming romance, and the gentleman at White's established a betting book on whether the Marquis would actually offer for the ancient Lady Winifred. Through it all, Hugh remained steadfast. He escorted Winifred to exhibitions at the Royal Academy, to concerts and literary salons, and even persuaded her to ride with him in Hyde Park during the fashionable hour, a clear public statement of his intentions. You realize you're ruining your reputation, Winifred remarked one afternoon as they walked through the British Museum, a footman discreetly trailing behind them. Lord Hastings stopped speaking to you at the Forsyth dinner. Hastings is a pompous bore who once tried to convince me to marry his vapid daughter, Hugh replied without concern. His silence is a blessing. Nevertheless, your choice of companion has cost you socially. He stopped before a glass case containing ancient Egyptian artifacts. Winnie, he said, using the familiar address he'd adopted in recent weeks, do you think I care for the good opinion of people whose values I find fundamentally misguided? You should. You have a position to maintain, responsibilities. Yes, I have responsibilities, he agreed. To my tenants, my dependents, my family name. None of which are compromised by my choice of wife. Winifred froze. Wife. Hugh's eyes widened as he realized what he'd said. I had planned a more romantic setting for this discussion. Hugh. No, wait. He took her hands, ignoring the scandalized look from an elderly lady viewing a nearby exhibit. I had a speech prepared. Poetry might have been involved. Despite the turmoil of emotions, Winifred couldn't help but smile. Poetry? From my practical diplomat. I contain multitudes, he replied with mock gravity. Though perhaps this is better. No artifice, no elaborate staging. Just truth between us, as it's always been. He kept hold of her hands. I love you, Winifred Vance. Your intelligence, your kindness, your unwavering integrity. I love how you see the world clearly yet without cynicism. I love that you've never compromised your principles even when society punished you for it. Tears pricked at her eyes. Hugh, are you certain? There will be talk. And children, at my age, I may not be able to provide heirs. If we are blessed with children, I will be grateful. If not, my cousin Thomas will inherit and likely do a fine job of it. His expression grew more serious. As for the talk, yes, there will be some. And then there will be a new scandal, a new source of gossip, and we will be yesterday's news." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment." But perhaps there is no perfect moment, only the courage to seize the imperfect ones. Opening the box revealed a sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. "Winifred Vance, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" For a moment, Winifred could only stare at the ring, overcome. Then, gathering herself, she said, "You understand that I come with very little dowry." Hugh laughed. "Is that a yes?" "I'm 8 and 20, she persisted. Practically decrepit by society's standards. "Winnie." His voice was tender. "I'm offering for you, not society. Yes or no?" She met his gaze, seeing nothing but sincerity and love reflected there. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." The wedding of the Marquis of Oxbridge to Lady Winifred Vance took place 6 weeks later at St. George's, Hanover Square. Society gossips who had expected a quiet, hurried affair were disappointed, for Hugh had insisted on a celebration befitting his bride's worth. The church overflowed with roses and lilies, and the guest list included diplomats, politicians, and even a royal duke who had worked with Hugh abroad. Lucy, now officially engaged to Lord Fennington, served as Winifred's bridesmaid, beaming with genuine happiness for her cousin. "You look radiant, Winnie," she whispered as they prepared to enter the church. "Lord Oxbridge is the envy of every gentleman in London." As Winifred walked down the aisle, she caught snippets of whispered conversation. "Cannot believe he chose someone so. Must be something extraordinary about her that we've overlooked. They say he wouldn't even consider anyone else," but these voices faded to insignificance when she saw Hugh waiting for her at the altar, his face transformed by joy. In that moment, Winifred understood that some truths existed beyond society's narrow definitions of worth and beauty. Hugh saw her, truly saw her, as she was, neither young nor old but simply herself. And in his eyes, that was enough. More than enough. 6 months later, the Marchioness of Oxbridge caused another sensation by announcing her pregnancy at the advanced age of 9 and 20. Society once again buzzed with speculation, and once again, the Marquis and Marchioness paid it no mind. "They say I'm a miracle," Winifred remarked one evening as they sat together in the library of Oxbridge House, her hand resting on her slightly rounded stomach. "Lady Jersey told everyone at Almack's that my condition defies medical understanding at my age." Hugh looked up from his book with an expression of exaggerated shock. Imagine that. A woman of nearly 30, bearing a child. Unprecedented in human history. Winifred laughed. "You're terrible." "Correction, I'm factually accurate." He set aside his book and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. "The Tun's obsession with youth is a recent fabrication, you know. My grandmother was 32 when she had my father." "Yes, but she was already married with other children by then." "Details," he said dismissively, placing his hand over hers on her stomach. "What matters is this. Our child. Our family." Winifred leaned against him, contentment washing over her. "I never thought I would have this," she admitted softly. "I had resigned myself to spinsterhood. And I had resigned myself to a diplomatic marriage of convenience." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "How fortunate that we both proved wrong." Outside the library windows, London society continued its endless cycle of balls and gossip, judgments and exclusions. But within the walls of Oxbridge House, Winifred had found a truth that transcended society's arbitrary rules, love that valued character over youth, substance over appearance, and the authentic self over social performance. It was, she reflected as Hugh's arms tightened around her, the most revolutionary act of all.